Hi, I'm Seraphine. My parents said they were just going on a short trip. 3 days, my mom texted. But when I showed up to check on Grandma, the gate was locked, the house was silent, and she was barely breathing. Then they FaceTimed me from a beach resort, laughing, saying, "Then you feed her." They thought they got away with it, but Grandma had one final secret, and it changed everything. What kind of family does this, and why me? The gate clicked behind me like it was snapping shut on something more than metal. There was a rusted padlock dangling from it, not new, but tight. I hadn't needed a key to this house in months, not since my mother said, "No point holding on to something you never visit." I never argued with her, not really. But today, after her one-line text, "Quick trip, all fine, house locked," something told me not to stay away. The garden looked like it hadn't seen a watering can in weeks. Dry rosemary bushes sagged against the fence, and the potted lavender my grandmother used to trim with surgical precision was withering under the sun. I stood still for a second, letting the unease settle in my stomach. It wasn't just the silence that bothered me. It was the absence of life. No birdsong, no wind chimes, not even the creak of a shifting shutter. I knocked once, then twice, louder. "Grandma?" I called out. No answer. I walked around the side, gravel crunching under each step. The windows were all closed, curtains drawn, except the small basement window half cracked open, like someone had tried to let air in, but gave up. I crouched down, dirt pressing into my jeans, and slid it wider. Dust wafted out, carrying with it the smell of stale bread and something metallic. My throat tightened. I hesitated, just a second, then pulled myself through. Inside, the air was heavy. A week's worth of silence clung to every object. The hallway was still dark, despite morning sunlight outside. Picture frames on the wall seemed off-kilter, as if someone had rushed past them. The thermostat blinked, off, and my fingertips brushed the plastic casing automatically. Cold. The living room was empty, but the floor creaked faintly under weight, not mine. I followed the sound to the sunroom, where the slanted roof let in filtered light. And there she was. Erowyn sat slumped in her armchair, blanket barely covering her lap. A half-full water jug rested on the table beside her, a slice of bread beside it, hardened and curling like paper left out too long. "Grandma?" I stepped closer, my voice caught between fear and fury. Her eyes fluttered open. She tried to smile. "They just left," she whispered. "I didn't ask who. I already knew." I knelt beside her, adjusting the blanket. Her skin was warm, but her breath shallow. I touched her wrist. Her pulse was weak, but steady. "Did they give you your meds?" She shook her head slowly. "Said I didn't need 'em. Said I sleep too much anyway." I blinked hard, forcing down the sting behind my eyes. The fridge had 3 things inside: a carton of milk, 2 apples, and expired yogurt. No leftovers, no medicine bottles. I checked the cabinet near the sink. Empty. I opened the front door out of instinct and found the bolt locked. From the outside, someone had physically secured it from the other side. They hadn't just forgotten her. They had locked her in and walked away. I took a photo with my phone. The bolt, the latch, the date on my screen. Then I turned around and went back to the sunroom. "I'm here now," I said quietly. "We're going to fix this." Grandma tried to sit up straighter. "Don't tell them." I froze. "What?" She reached for my hand. "Don't make them angry. Just wait. Be quiet." I stood up, heart pounding. "No, not this time." The FaceTime tone chirped from my phone just then, my mother's name flashing on screen. I answered. The screen exploded with sunlight and synthetic cheer. They were poolside, my father in a Hawaiian shirt, drink in hand. My mother wore a sun hat, eyes squinting against the brightness. "Oh, hey," she said, waving. "You found her." My dad chuckled. "Hope she didn't eat all your snacks." "You locked her in," I said evenly. "There's no food, no meds, no working thermostat." Dad took a sip from his glass. "You're always so dramatic, Sarah. She's fine." "She sleeps more than a cat." Probably didn't even notice we left. You didn't tell anyone, I said. You didn't leave instructions. You bolted the front door. Mom rolled her eyes. We needed the break. She's not helpless. She couldn't reach the fridge. They went quiet for half a second. Then my father shrugged. Well, then you feed her. And the call ended. I stared at the darkened screen, my hand shaking, but not from shock, not anymore. This wasn't new. It was just louder this time. I sat down in the armchair across from Erowyn. Her gaze had drifted to the window. When did they go? I asked softly. 2 nights ago, she said. They said not to tell. I nodded slowly. I believe you. A memory surfaced. Me, 7 years old, watching them leave her at a restaurant while they drove home without saying goodbye. Me crying when we got back. It was a joke, Dad had said, laughing. You take things too seriously. You're not like Rowena, Mom used to say. She knows how to handle things without turning them into a scene. I used to wonder if I was imagining the favoritism, if maybe I was just too sensitive. But when you start to question your memory often enough, you stop trusting your own eyes. Until you see someone locked in a house, living off water and old bread, and then you stop asking whether you're overreacting. You start asking what else you've let slide. I checked the medicine drawer again. Nothing. I opened every cabinet. Nothing. I called the pharmacy listed on her old prescription labels. No recent pickups. They hadn't renewed anything in over 2 weeks. I walked back to her room, gently lifted the edge of her blanket to tuck it in, and found it. A piece of lined paper, creased and folded small. I opened it slowly. In shaky handwriting, just one sentence. Don't let them do this to me again. I stood there for a moment, my fingers tightening around the note, and then I moved. I took her phone, checked the call logs, no outgoing calls since Monday, no texts sent. I grabbed my charger, powered up her tablet, opened the camera history. Empty. It wasn't just neglect, it was erasure. I went back to the door, snapped another photo, opened my notes app, started documenting. Time, date, condition, statements. When they came back, and I knew they would, smiling like nothing had happened, I wouldn't be unarmed. I locked the door from the inside, took a deep breath, and whispered aloud to no one but myself. Not this time. I sat with the note for a long time. It was folded neatly, the creases worn soft like a page revisited again and again. My grandmother's handwriting had always been strong, bold even in her old-fashioned cursive. But this was different. Each letter trembled like it had taken all her strength just to push the pen. Just one line. Don't let them do this to me again. It didn't feel like a request. It felt like a directive, a quiet plea written by someone who no longer trusted that her voice would carry if she spoke aloud. I held the paper between my palms, not knowing whether I wanted to protect it or tear it into pieces just to stop the chill crawling up my spine. Years ago, she used to send postcards from every little town she visited, tiny, bright windows into her joy. Thinking of you, she'd write. Try the peach cobbler here next time. This wasn't that. This wasn't memory. This was fear inked into paper. I flipped the note and saw the date. 3 days ago. The day they left, the certainty hit hard. This hadn't been carelessness. It wasn't a mistake. They didn't forget her. They planned it, locked her in, left her alone. It wasn't a coincidence. I tucked the paper into my wallet and stood up. There was something else nagging at the back of my mind, something I hadn't thought about in months. I crossed the hall to the coat closet, dug through a box of holiday lights and backup batteries until I found the tiny black nanny cam I had bought after her last fall. At the time, they called it paranoia. Said I was exaggerating. Funny how exaggeration turns into evidence with enough hindsight. The camera was dusty, its battery drained. I plugged it into the wall and used my phone's hotspot to wake it up. The screen flickered, then loaded the storage drive. A blue bar crept across the progress bar while I tapped my foot, waiting for it to give me answers I didn't want. The first few files were long, uneventful, shadows stretching with the sunlight, Erowyn napping, chairs unmoved. I skipped ahead. The fourth video showed her in the kitchen, reaching for the fridge door. Her hand trembled. She leaned too far. The next moment, she slipped, slow motion, until the fall was full speed. She hit the tile, hard. I flinched. She didn't cry out, just lay there. A few minutes passed. She tried to sit up but couldn't. She crawled to the nearest chair, struggled to lift herself. And then, she gave up, rested her head against the cabinet. No one came. No footsteps. No doors opening. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator and her quiet breathing. I paused the video and closed my eyes. This was what they left behind. Not just a locked house, not just neglect, but deliberate silence. I downloaded the footage and named the file. Day 1 Fall. When I walked back to the sunroom, Erowyn had her eyes open. She was watching the light change across the wall like she was tracking the sun's retreat. I didn't speak right away. I crouched beside her, showed her the clip on my phone. Her lips tightened. No tears, just resignation. "I didn't want you to find it like that," she said softly. "You shouldn't have had to write that note," I replied. "I wasn't sure if I'd still be here when you came." Those words hit harder than any accusation. She looked down at her blanket. "They think if I'm quiet, I'm okay." "Then they've forgotten who raised me," I said, gently placing her hand between mine. Her smile was tired, but genuine. "If you're going to do something about this, you'll need what's under my sewing machine." It wasn't a cryptic riddle, just quiet instruction. I nodded. In her room, the familiar whir of her sewing machine had long since faded. The cabinet beneath it creaked as I opened it. Inside, a zippered pouch with a flash drive, a manila envelope, and a thin notebook labeled in slanted ink. Backups. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and opened the envelope. Hospital bills, not 1 or 2, but pages, ER visits, lab work, prescriptions, all unpaid, all dating back 6 months. She hadn't mentioned any of it, probably because she knew they wouldn't pay, or worse, that they would hide it. The flash drive contained documents, photos of bruises dated with timestamps, receipts, and what looked like a draft of a letter to an attorney. At the end of the notebook, scrawled in red pen, was a line that chilled me more than the note from earlier. "If anything happens to me, check the bank box." This wasn't fear anymore. This was planning. She had prepared for silence, prepared to be erased, and now it was my job to make sure she wasn't. I backed up the footage, stored it to 3 drives, one for me, one for Asmaria, one off-site. The bills I scanned, labeled, filed. Everything went into a folder. I called it Truth. While I labeled files, my phone buzzed. Group text, Rowena. "Hope you're not playing detective again. We'll be back tomorrow. Don't touch anything." I stared at the screen for a long minute. Then I read it aloud to Erowyn, who let out a single dry laugh. "They always think threats are subtle," I said. Her eyes met mine, stronger now than they'd been all day. "You've got more sense than the rest of them combined." I nodded and whispered, "They have no idea what I've already seen." Rowena didn't knock. The front door creaked open like it had done 100 times before, and there she was, poised, polished, and carrying a bag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She walked in like she owned the place, like she always had. I was in the kitchen, barely halfway through organizing the folder of evidence when her heels clacked across the floor. "Oh, you're here," she said casually, like it wasn't a surprise, like she hadn't sent that smug little text last night. She didn't ask about Erowyn, didn't even glance toward the sunroom. "I figured I'd drop by, grab a few things before they come back tomorrow," she continued, heading toward the hallway like this was her weekend getaway spot, not the scene of what should have been a crime report. "You have a key?" I asked. She shrugged, flashing a rehearsed smile. "Mom gave it to me a while ago. You know how she gets with hiding extras around." Her tone was light, dismissive, but calculated. Every step, every glance, practiced. She moved toward the wine rack, pulled a bottle, examined the label, and muttered, "Ugh, Cabernet. You'd think by now they'd learn how to stock decent whites." My hands clenched slightly. "You didn't think to call first?" "You're overreacting again, Sarah," she said, not looking at me. "You always think you're the savior, like you're the only one who cares." I walked around the counter slowly, planting myself between her and the dining room. She could have died in here, Rowena. She sighed, rolling her eyes. We all agreed she needed rest. She sleeps all day anyway. You're the one making it a thing. She fell, I said flatly. I have footage, no meds, no food, and the door was bolted from the outside. Rowena scoffed. Old people fall, that's what they do. I stared at her. You knew, and you still did nothing. I didn't know she'd crawl to the fridge, Sarah, she snapped. God, you act like we lit the house on fire. She left a note, I said, in case she didn't make it. Does that sound like a nap to you? Rowena set the wine bottle down a little too hard. She's always been dramatic. She cried when I forgot her birthday one year. That woman's entire personality is nostalgia and guilt. The words were so sharp, so surgical, they left me stunned. Not because I didn't know Rowena could say something like that, but because she said it with so little effort. A burden wrapped in nostalgia, she muttered, brushing her hair back. You eat that stuff up. Always have. I took a deep breath. You don't have to pretend anymore, Ro. I know what you're doing. What I'm doing? She laughed. You're the one playing detective, filming people, snooping around drawers, acting like you're some kind of hero. You're obsessed with being right. I didn't answer. There was no winning with her. There never was. She walked out just as easily as she'd walked in, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and something bitterer underneath. Resentment. After she left, I sat in the kitchen, elbows on the table, staring at the empty seat across from me. That was where Grandma used to sip tea while humming through the paper. That was where she'd taught me how to cut citrus for marmalade. And now it felt hollow. I remembered a day months ago, maybe October? I had stopped by unannounced and caught a glimpse of Erowyn through the kitchen curtain. She had her forehead pressed to the window pane, her eyes damp, lips moving like she was whispering to herself. Rowena had just driven off. At the time, I told myself it was probably allergies, that maybe she was just tired. But now, remembering the way her hand barely lifted to wave when she noticed me, the way she blinked like she'd been staring at the same spot for too long, I knew better. I should have asked, should have stayed. I opened my phone and scrolled through old texts. The pattern was embarrassingly clear. Every time I raised concern, it was dismissed. It's not that serious. You always worry too much. Let her be. Every single time, Rowena was the voice of reason, the calm one, the one who explained things away with a soft smile and perfect posture. And every time, I backed down because it was easier than being labeled the dramatic one. I opened our old group thread. Months of messages, holiday plans, passive comments. I searched meds and found a message from Mom in February. Rowena's got it covered. That was it. That was the full plan. I flipped back to the folder. Each detail began to stack, like bricks in a wall I had ignored being built around us. Erowyn used to joke that I was the only one who asked questions. That's why I trust you, she'd say. You don't smile through discomfort. I opened the footage again from the nanny cam, scrubbing through until I reached the day before I arrived. She was sitting at the window again. And this time, I noticed something. Outside the window stood Rowena, not moving, not waving, just watching. She wasn't talking. She wasn't looking around. She was just there. Silent. I paused the video, my breath caught in my throat. Her face, expressionless, unreadable, like a statue. I zoomed in, took a screenshot. You weren't just ignoring it, I whispered, voice trembling with something I couldn't quite name. You were watching it happen. And now, I was watching you. It was after dark when I returned to her sewing room. The house had taken on that kind of stillness that made everything sound louder. My footsteps, the creak of floorboards, the soft shift of fabric as I pulled out her old stool. The lamp above her machine flickered for a moment before settling, casting a warm circle of light over worn wood and metal. The drawer beneath the table had always been finicky, sticking slightly on the left. I knew the trick, tilt and tug, learned from years of watching her dig out bobbins and thread. But this time, I wasn't looking for needles or spools. I reached in deeper, feeling along the bottom until my fingers found a flat envelope labeled in her steady hand. Contingency. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was blank, except for her signature at the bottom. Fragile, delicate. Nothing like the bold loops she used to sign Christmas cards. No witness. No date. Just her name at the end of what someone had clearly hoped would become a legal document. My stomach tightened. I held it up against the light and ran my thumb over the paper's edge. It was a power of attorney form, one of the common templates you could download online, fill out, and manipulate with the right kind of pressure. My name wasn't on it. No names were, just a signature. How tired was she when she signed it? Who placed it in front of her? Did they make her believe it was routine, helpful? The betrayal crept in slowly, not like a wave, but like ice in my veins. I folded the document, returned it to the envelope, and locked it in my backpack. Something told me this was only the surface. I stood and walked out into the hallway. As I passed the photo wall, portraits lining the house like a curated history, I noticed a frame that hadn't been there before. Smaller, shinier, clearly newer than the others. I tilted my head. It was a family photo. My parents, Rowena, Grandma, and where I should have been, there was just background. Literally cut out. Not blurred, not photoshopped, cut, clean through the image. I pulled the frame off the wall, flipped it over. The nameplate was missing. All the others had little brass tags engraved. Easter 2004, Thanksgiving 2010. This one had nothing. Just the faint stickiness of glue that once held a label in place. They hadn't just left me out of the conversation, they had erased me from the memory. I carried the photo into the living room and set it on the coffee table. The act felt ceremonial somehow, offering proof to the silence that I wasn't imagining any of it. Upstairs, I powered on Dad's old desktop. I didn't need to guess the password. It was the same one he'd used for everything since 2007, Rowena01. I typed it in and clicked through folders until I found a directory labeled Estate Drafts. There were 5 versions of the same document. In each one, my name was absent, not even in passing, just gone. One version included a footnote, remove secondary heir, clarify intent. Another marked my name with non-primary and highlighted it in red. It wasn't a mistake. It was a process, a legal strategy. I copied every file to a USB drive and labeled it Sequence. There was a bitterness building in my chest, not from the exclusion, but from the precision. They weren't just avoiding me, they were writing me out in plain sight. I printed one version and brought it downstairs. Erwin was still in the sunroom, eyes closed, resting. I crouched beside her. "Can I ask you something?" She opened her eyes slowly, met my gaze without surprise. "Did they ask you to sign something recently?" Her expression shifted like someone bracing for a blow. "They said it was just in case something happened, that it would make things easier." "For them?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "They told me you were busy, that you were doing well, had your life, and that I shouldn't bother you." The shame in her voice didn't belong to her. It belonged to whoever made her feel like a burden. "You don't need to explain," I said. "You signed because you trusted them. That's what families are supposed to be." She turned away, blinking. "I thought I was protecting you from responsibility." "You were protecting them from accountability," I replied softly. She didn't argue. I kissed her temple and stood. As I gathered the documents to file away, my phone buzzed on the counter. A new email, from my father's address. Subject: Draft in case of escalation. I clicked. Attached were 2 PDFs. The first was a form listing beneficiaries, my name misspelled, swapped with a middle name I hadn't used since high school. The second omitted me entirely. Beneath the attachments, a line: "We may need this version if she pushes." I stared at the screen. They weren't just forgetting me. They were planning to erase me, not just from dinner tables or group texts, from the records. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when I woke up, heart pounding with something that wasn't quite panic, but carried its taste. I hadn't slept much. Every creak in the floorboards last night had me alert, listening for something I couldn't name. I got up, made coffee too strong, and sat down in front of my laptop. The video file stared back at me from the screen. It was short, less than a minute, audio from the nanny cam I'd recovered. The timestamp placed it the day before I arrived. In it, Rowena's voice, low and careless, filtered in through the kitchen mic. "She's too soft. We don't need her in the picture. Let her play nurse if she wants to feel important." I played it 3 times. Not because I didn't hear it the first time, but because I couldn't believe how normal she sounded while saying it, like it was just another Sunday comment about which salad dressing to use. I leaned back in the chair, fingers digging into the arms. It wasn't the betrayal that hit hardest. It was how casual it all was, how familiar they were with writing me off. I emailed the file to myself under the name Nurse Statement WAVE and backed it up in 2 drives. After a second cup of coffee, I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Seraphine, is Grandma okay?" "You hid her medication." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "Don't play confused. Her blood pressure pills and circulation meds were never refilled. I found sealed bottles in a cabinet above the fridge. That's not neglect, that's obstruction." She exhaled sharply. "I didn't want her overdosing on nonsense. You know how forgetful she is. It's better to hold on to them and give them as needed." "That's not how medicine works. That's how control works," I said. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You're blowing this out of proportion. You always—" "I documented everything." Her voice faltered. "You're making this ugly." "It already was," I said, quiet but sharp. "You just kept it behind nice curtains." I ended the call before she could spin the narrative any further. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon from the tea Grandma and I shared last night. I stood and walked back into her room, where the pill organizer sat on the nightstand. I flipped each compartment, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all empty. But not because they'd been taken, because they'd never been filled. I pulled out the prescription sheets from her folder, cross-checked them against the pharmacy's online portal. 2 hadn't been filled in 3 weeks. The last pickup had been done by Magdalene, signed with a flourish I recognized too well. Climbing onto a chair, I searched the highest cabinets. In the back, behind an old cookie tin, I found them. Still in pharmacy bags, 1 unopened, 1 untouched. I took photos of the packaging, labels, dates, created a time-stamped folder titled Dosage Withheld. I documented everything. Each refill missed, each note from her doctor still stapled inside her checkup packet. I opened my email and began a new draft. Subject: Incident Timeline, Medical Neglect. Every detail, every receipt, every recorded call would go into this email chain. It wouldn't just be documentation, it would be accountability. By mid-morning, Grandma was awake and reading the local paper in the sunroom. I sat down across from her. "No one else comes through that door unless I'm here," I told her. She looked at me, calm and steady. "I think I always knew it'd come to this." I smiled faintly. "Still, it feels different when you finally say it out loud." I pulled out her old baby monitor and reprogrammed the settings, locking everyone else out. I went into the Home's camera app and removed all family emails except mine and Asmaria's. On the fridge, I posted a list labeled Emergency Contacts. It had 2 names, mine and her lawyer's. "Too much?" I asked her. She smiled. "Too late for subtle." That afternoon, I double-checked that all drawers were locked, all files backed up. I was about to brew another cup of tea when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message: "If you go public, you'll regret it. Not everything needs to be a battle." I stared at it. No name, no context, but I didn't need either. I took a screenshot, archived the number, and whispered to myself with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. Good, that means they're nervous. The bank had that same sterile chill that always made me uncomfortable. Cool air, polite smiles, carpet that muffled steps like everyone inside was walking on eggshells. But today, I wasn't here to tiptoe. I was here with power of attorney in hand and a fire in my chest I didn't bother hiding. The manager looked up when I approached. "How can I help you today?" I handed her the papers and said calmly, "I'm accessing my grandmother's lockbox. Her name is Erwin Byrne." Her eyes flicked to the signature, to my driver's license, then back to me. 1 moment. 10 minutes later, I was seated in a private room, the lockbox set on the table in front of me like it might explode. I opened it slowly. There weren't stacks of money, no jewelry, just envelopes. One marked Will, 2013. Another, newer, with superseded Do Not Destroy in Erwin's handwriting. And a third, thinner envelope, simply labeled Just in Case. I opened the old will first. My father's name was listed in every section: sole beneficiary, sole executor, sole point of contact, every asset, every account, every inch of this house. I swallowed hard. Then I opened the second envelope. The new will was shorter, cleaner. My name filled the spaces where his used to be. Dated 3 months ago. Signed by Erwin. Witnessed. Notarized. And beneath the signature, in her handwriting again. Revised. Do not trust verbal promises. They'd all been pretending like the old document still stood, while the new one had already replaced it. The entire narrative was based on a lie they hoped no one would bother uncovering. I tucked the papers back in, sealed them tight, and left the bank without saying another word. Later that afternoon, I took a walk down the street to Minerva Fitz's house. She'd been my grandmother's neighbor for over a decade, a quiet woman with a garden of stubborn lavender and more wind chimes than I could count. She answered the door in socks and a knit shawl, her gray hair pulled back loosely. "Oh, Seraphine," she said, surprised. "Everything all right?" I explained gently that I was looking into some things. "Did you happen to see anyone come or go from the house earlier this week?" She tilted her head. "Come in." We sat in her cozy living room, the air smelling faintly of cedar and lemon balm. She pulled out her tablet, scrolled through her porch camera app. "There," she said, pointing. The footage played. It was crystal clear. My mother stood at the front gate, glancing around quickly. Then she pulled the padlock tight, pocketed the key, and walked away without looking back. The timestamp read 2:13 p.m. Broad daylight. Minerva paused the video. "I thought maybe your grandma didn't want visitors. I didn't realize she was alone." She was. Her lips pressed together. "I'm so sorry." I nodded. "You didn't know." But now I have proof. I copied the footage onto a flash drive, thanked her, and headed home. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out the original will and the updated one. I laid them side by side, took photos, created a digital folder titled Sequence of Control. In it, I dropped the new will, the outdated one, camera footage from Minerva, photos of the hidden medication, screenshots of the family texts, a recording of my mom admitting she withheld medication, a copy of the nanny cam footage of Erwin's fall. I emailed everything to Asmaria with a single line: building momentum. Then I opened a text thread I hadn't touched in months, Rowena. At 7:14 p.m., her message popped up. "I know you're angry, but don't let this turn into a disaster. You'll break Mom's heart." I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Asmaria. Then I sat with it for a moment, rereading it again and again. "She already broke Grandma's," I whispered. That night, I opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "Cease and desist, unauthorized entry and medical decision-making." I listed every instance, every violation, every overstep. I didn't write it out of spite. I wrote it out of necessity. They'd relied on the illusion that I would keep being polite, quiet, accommodating. But that illusion had cracked. At 9:43 p.m., my phone rang. It was Asmaria. "I've reviewed what you sent," she said, voice firm. "If this goes to court, it won't end well for them." There was a pause. "But I need to ask, are you ready to be the one to end it?" I walked out to the back deck. The ocean was a dull hum in the distance, stars faint behind cloud cover. I took a deep breath. "They counted on me staying silent," I said. "I'm done with that." Another pause. Then it's time. I hadn't touched Grandma's tablet in weeks, but something about the way she looked at me that morning, slow and unsure, reminded me of a conversation we'd had once. Quiet, late at night, about an email she said she'd written and never sent. She'd been vague at the time, unsure if it went out, unsure even if she saved it. I powered it on, the battery holding just enough life to blink awake. My breath slowed as I navigated through her Gmail, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. The drafts folder was empty, the inbox clean, too clean. But then I saw the security notifications. 3. All identical. Accessed from another device. The recovery process took time, but I got it. Tucked in the trash folder was a single message titled, "If something happens to me." The body was simple. They don't think I notice, but I know what they're doing. I'm scared. I stared at the bottom of the screen. Deleted, 2:04 a.m. I checked the device ID. It wasn't her tablet. It matched an Apple ID linked to my mother's phone. I closed the tablet, jaw set. By mid-morning, Rowena appeared with practiced ease. She didn't ring the bell. She strolled in with a half-smile and a Tupperware container. "I brought soup," she chirped. "Chicken and rice, Grandma's favorite." Irwin was in the armchair, legs wrapped in her old knit blanket. She looked up slowly, not quite surprised. "Thank you, dear." Rowena held up the scarf like a prize, laying it gently over Grandma's shoulders. "You made this for me years ago," she said, voice dripping with manufactured warmth. "I still wear it when I miss you." I watched from the hallway, silent, phone in hand. Rowena adjusted the curtain for lighting, tilted the chair. Then, casually, placed her phone on the end table and tapped the front camera. I hit record on mine. "Let's get a little memory, shall we?" she said sweetly. Then, as if on cue, her lower lip trembled, her voice cracked just right. "She's the strongest woman I've ever known. Watching her fade has been hard." I watched her blink at the phone camera. Just one tear. Perfect timing. Later, when she left, I watched the video go up online. Grateful for every moment with Grandma # family first # caregiver life. I opened the video, screen recorded it, and filed it next to the email draft and pharmacy records. Then I sent her a text. "Next time you need content, ask before using someone's pain." She responded within 2 minutes. "You're projecting. Not everything is about you." I didn't reply. I saved the message. Then I opened a fresh document and began outlining a visual timeline. Every post, every visit, every lie masked as a tribute. She had weaponized sympathy, wrapped cruelty in cozy captions. I clicked through my security logs again, rechecking app access history. One by one I found them. Downloads and deletions synced to Rowena's iCloud. Edits to camera permissions. Remote toggles of live stream settings. It hadn't been one slip. It had been ongoing, deliberate. She'd spent months framing herself as the doting caregiver while ensuring no one else had a chance to interfere with the version of reality she built. It was all there. Timelines, accounts, evidence. I wasn't theorizing. I was tracking. Every smiling photo was a mask. Every staged tear, a tool. I added it to the file. That evening, I heard Grandma softly humming to herself in the kitchen. I peeked in. She was boiling water for tea. No scarf, no fake nostalgia. Just her, doing what she'd always done. Surviving in silence. My phone buzzed. Rowena had just posted another video. "My grandma deserves better." In the thumbnail, Erwin was asleep, her head tilted gently, the lighting soft, like a Hallmark film. The music, acoustic guitar. The filter, dreamy blur. The caption read, "She raised me with grace. I'll fight for her the same way she fought for us." Comments flooded in. Yawned hearts, prayer emojis, people praising her selflessness. I stood in the hallway, fingers numb. "She's not just covering her tracks," I whispered. "She's building a stage." The scent of cornbread filled the kitchen, warm and almost too comforting for what was coming. I had baked it not for them, but for her. Erwin's favorite, something steady in the middle of a night I knew would unravel more than any of us were ready for. The document was printed. The video cued. I set the table like it was just another family dinner, but the weight in my chest said otherwise. They arrived 10 minutes late. Lavinia first, in a sports jacket over a pressed polo, as if he were attending a retirement brunch. Magdalene wore pearls. Rowena was last, of course she was, walking in like a politician, phone already angled for the light, her lips pursed in sympathy. "Smells great in here," she said. "You really went all out." No one mentioned the reason we were meeting. No one asked how Erowyn was doing. Not a single one of them looked toward the room where she sat, watching from the sunroom, silent and steady as stone. I led them into the living room. The cornbread sat untouched on the side table. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "I want to show you something." I tapped play on the video file. Erowyn's voice filled the room, recorded clearly, her face sharp on screen. "I choose Seraphine," she said, "because she shows up, because I fear what happens if she's not here." Rowena's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Magdalene's smile tightened. Lavinia looked away. "She didn't mean that," Rowena whispered. "She was probably confused." I turned to face them, steady. "She recorded it 3 weeks ago, alone, with no prompting, full memory, full voice." No one spoke. I walked to the dining table, pulled out a folder, and laid 2 wills side by side. The older one, Lavinia's name all over it. The newer, mine. "This one," I said, tapping the newer document, "was signed 6 months ago, with 2 witnesses and a certified notary. It is the only legally binding document." Magdalene scoffed. She didn't know what she was signing. I held up a note, written in her handwriting. "Then explain this. A letter she left behind confirming her intent, notarized, dated, with a clear request." Rowena crossed her arms. "It won't stand in court. You know that. People are manipulated all the time." I looked directly at her. "It already has. It's filed." And then it happened. Lavinia's voice cracked first. "You think this makes you special?" he snapped. "You always wanted to be the golden girl. Well, congrats. You finally got your prize." "You mean the house you expected to inherit without lifting a finger?" I said, tone even. "The bank accounts you were already trying to drain?" He stepped forward. "You have no idea what we've done for her. What we've sacrificed." From the hallway, a voice cut through the tension. "Don't you dare pretend you didn't try to erase her." Everyone turned. Erowyn was there, sitting in her chair, wheeled forward just enough to be seen. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her voice carried the steel of someone done with pretending. "You locked me in with a piece of bread and a bottle of water," she said. "You called it protection. I call it abandonment." Magdalene stepped forward, her voice sweet. "We thought you needed rest." "You didn't think at all," Erowyn replied. "Or maybe you thought no one would notice. Maybe you thought Seraphine would stay quiet, like always." Rowena was pale, her words caught somewhere between shock and rage. "This is ridiculous," she finally muttered. "No," I said. "This is documented. This is the truth. You may be used to hiding behind Sunday smiles and holiday cards, but I've had enough of the show." Magdalene's eyes flicked between me and the screen. "We tried to take care of her. By draining her accounts, deleting her emails, fabricating stories for Instagram." Erowyn spoke again, quieter now. "I gave you the benefit of the doubt for too long. But I will not let you take away what little I have left, not while I'm still here." The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that closes a chapter before you've even turned the page. Rowena shoved her phone into her purse and turned for the door. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. Lavinia followed her without a word. Magdalene lingered. She looked at Erowyn, something unspoken in her eyes, anger, maybe fear, or the unsettling realization that control had slipped. "You always needed us more than we needed you," she said. I didn't flinch. "Then why are you all so scared now?" She left, door shutting behind her with a finality that felt earned. Erowyn exhaled, slow and steady. I knelt beside her. "You okay?" Her eyes softened. "Now, yes." We sat like that for a while, not as protector and patient, but as 2 women who had survived the same storm, just from different ends of the house. The phone rang at 6:11 a.m. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee, and the sun hadn't broken past the marine layer yet. I knew before answering that it wouldn't be a social call. The hospital's name flashed on the screen. My chest tightened. This is the emergency department at Seaside Memorial, the nurse said, her tone practiced but clipped. Your grandmother, Irwin Byrne, was admitted this morning. She was found dehydrated and disoriented. I didn't ask how she was found. I just said, I'll be there in 15. By the time I reached her room, she was hooked up to IV fluids. Her skin looked paper thin. The nurse adjusted a monitor and glanced at me with a tired sympathy I recognized from too many similar conversations over the years. The labs show long-term signs of malnutrition, the doctor explained later. Not just dehydration. This isn't new. It's chronic. Lavinia and Magdalene stood by the window, looking startled and insulted, like they had been accused of a crime at a dinner party. We didn't know it had gotten that bad, Magdalene said, feigning disbelief. She always looked fine. Lavinia added, she never said anything. She didn't complain. I stood silently, hands clasped in front of me, letting the facts speak louder than my voice. The doctor didn't look convinced. She didn't have to say it, he said. Her labs did. I stayed with Grandma while they disappeared down the hall, no doubt rehearsing how they'd explain this away. I adjusted her blanket, gently brushed back her hair, and waited for her to stir. She didn't open her eyes, but she murmured, I didn't want to leave you to clean up the mess. Outside the building, needing air, I stepped into the garden courtyard. That's when I saw it, a girl in scrubs, maybe 19, filming a TikTok near the fountain. She was whispering into her phone camera, voice soft and performative. This woman inspired me today, she said. She reminded me how strong our elders are. This is for all the grandmothers out there. I might have ignored it if I hadn't caught a glimpse of the screen. It was my grandmother, crying. In a hallway I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold. I approached her. Where did you get that video? She blinked, surprised. Oh, I saw it on Instagram. It's trending. Someone tagged it. #ElderJustice. I pulled out my phone, typed in the tag, scrolled. There it was. Erowyn, hunched in a chair, wiping her face. Captioned, She deserves better. #StopNeglect. And beneath it, original post by Rowena. My hands clenched. That hallway wasn't even in this hospital. It was from the care home. The one they shipped her to for a weekend last spring when I was out of town. The one she begged never to go back to. Back inside, I called Esmaria. Check your inbox, she said before I even spoke. You'll want to see what I just found. A link, a live stream, dated 5 months ago. Rowena had filmed herself walking through the hallway of that same care home, smiling tearfully. And then, Erowyn's voice in the background. I didn't want to be here. They brought me while I was asleep. My heart stopped. I never saw this video. It wasn't in our shared folders. It was wiped clean before I came back from that work trip. Now, it was viral. I stared at the screen, 100 emotions crashing into each other. They had weaponized her suffering, branded it as advocacy. They used exposure as a shield. And I had let them. But not anymore. I downloaded every version of the footage, archived it, filed it under a new folder labeled Exhibits. By noon, I was back in the waiting room. Lavinia and Magdalene sat across from me, their silence sharp. Rowena arrived in sunglasses, holding a green smoothie, like this was brunch and not a reckoning. She's not the one who needs rehab, I said, breaking the silence. Magdalene scoffed. You think because you filed some paperwork, you're queen of the castle? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my binder and laid out the hospital report, the medication audit, and a printed transcript of Rowena's live stream. Rowena's eyes scanned the paper. Her jaw twitched. She didn't speak. This is a pattern, I said. And I'm done pretending it's not. Lavinia stood. We'll contest this. You don't get to decide what's best for her. You already did, I replied. When you left her locked in a house with no food. Before they could respond, a woman in a navy blazer entered, clipboard in hand, badge clipped to her chest. Seraphine Byrne? Yes. I'm from Adult Protective Services. We received several flagged reports over the past 24 hours, including video evidence, witness statements, and a formal complaint from hospital staff. Lavinia's face turned red. You called them? I shook my head. No, I said, voice steady. The internet did. I met Ismaria at her office early the next morning, the fog still clinging to the edges of the hills like it wasn't ready to let go of the night. Her assistant handed me a folder as I walked in, no words exchanged, just the firm grip of confirmation. Inside were the latest statements from Erwin's accounts I hadn't even known existed until the court filings began to take shape. Page after page, transaction after transaction. Withdrawals marked family care, personal caregiver expenses, meal delivery services. Over $40,000 gone in less than 10 months. Each entry read like a punch: Lavinia's golf tournament in Arizona, a wellness retreat Rowena attended in Napa, a $5,000 donation to a nonprofit Magdalene once posted about, only for it to be quietly removed a week later. They were bold, as Maria said, flipping through the pages with surgical calm. No effort to cover the trail. They assumed no one would ever check. They were right, I said. Until now. After reviewing the financials, I was introduced to Dennis, a forensic accountant from Esmaria's team. He walked me through everything with the kind of emotionless precision that made my skin crawl. This charge happened on May 12th, he said, pointing to a highlighted entry. It coincides with the weekend your grandmother was moved into a temporary facility. That was the weekend I had food poisoning, I said. He nodded. During that stay, the facility submitted a report indicating signs of confusion due to missed medication. Here, see this. A CVS transaction shows a refill was purchased but not delivered to the facility. I leaned back in the chair. My mind was calculating faster than my heart could catch up. These aren't just numbers, I said. They're lies dressed up as love. Dennis gave me a nod of grim agreement. And fraud, technically. It was methodical, almost too clean. Charges added under cover of compassion, small enough not to raise suspicion, but steady enough to drain. Later that afternoon, a nurse approached me in the hallway outside Erwin's room. Miss Byrne, I thought you'd want to see this, she said, handing me a slip from the hospital's witness registry, dated 6 months prior. Rowena's name printed neatly under Visitor. Purpose of visit. Document signing. At the bottom was the signature line, Erwin's name, barely legible. Next to it, the witness's comment. Patient appeared confused. No verbal confirmation obtained. I scanned it immediately, added it to the growing archive. The hospital had already begun adding additional security to her floor. Visitors now had to be approved by me. No exceptions. Back home, my voicemail was blinking. It was Lavinia. You want to destroy the family? His voice cracked like static. Fine, then bury us all. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. Instead, I forwarded it to Ismaria. Every layer of control they'd built was peeling off now, collapsing under the weight of their own entitlement. The press hadn't picked up the story, yet. But I had a statement ready, just in case. I kept it short and clean. A daughter protecting her grandmother. A family choosing silence over accountability. A system being corrected one file at a time. By dusk, the house was quiet. Erwin slept peacefully for the first time in days. I sat by the front window, listening to the faint sound of wind chimes 2 doors down. Then came the vibration. A text from Rowena. You win. Are you happy now? I didn't type back. I walked outside, barefoot on the porch, and saw the envelope before I opened the door, taped to the mailbox. Inside was a thumb drive, labeled in black marker, the real story. I stood there for a long time, drive in one hand, the other gripping the edge of the doorframe. They never expected to lose. Now they were offering confession, or control. Esmaria's office always had this quiet hum to it, something between disciplined calm and the sound of systems working behind walls. It suited her, this rhythm of precision. She slid a thick binder across the table without ceremony. Everything is finalized, she said, tapping the cover gently. You're officially the active estate holder, sole guardian, power of attorney, and it's all been recorded. I opened the binder. Inside were notarized documents, affidavits, bank authorizations, and a letter from the notary who had overseen the will signing 6 months ago. His words were simple, professional, and damning in their clarity. The testator was lucid, willing, and expressed no coercion. "It's done," she said, but it didn't feel done. I thanked her, gathered the binder, and left without needing to say much more. Later, I walked the beach near the edge of town. The tide was low, the sky a wash of pale orange. My feet sank into the wet sand, each step pulling something out of me that I didn't know I'd been holding. The town was quiet. No one had reached out since the confrontation. No texts, no passive-aggressive calls, not even an accidental email. It was like they had erased themselves from the conversation. I stood still, wind tugging at the hem of my coat, and remembered what Erawan had once whispered to me when I was 15, crying quietly after Rowena had been praised for something I did. "You were never loud," she said, brushing my hair behind my ear. "You were lasting." I let the waves come close to my feet before stepping back and whispered to no one, "I'm still here." That night, back at home, I sat down with a pen and legal pad, not for notes or filings, but for myself. I started a letter I knew I'd never send, just something to put an end to all the things I'd held in. I wrote, "Dear Seraphine," and kept going until I had said everything to the girl who had kept showing up, even when no one asked her to. When I went to place the binder on the shelf, I noticed a yellow envelope tucked behind one of Grandma's old cookbooks. It was labeled in her handwriting, "Read only when you've made it through." I opened it. Inside was a single page, the ink a little shaky, but still hers. "You stayed. You carried dignity where others dropped it for convenience. My name lives better in your hands than theirs." I didn't cry, not because it didn't matter, but because for once, it didn't hurt. That kind of acknowledgement, that silent agreement between two people who survived the same betrayal in different ways, it did something deeper than tears. It healed. The next morning, I went through the old group chat one last time, scanned the past 12 months of messages, scrolled past the blame, the gaslighting, the orchestrated apologies. Then I hit delete. One thread gone, not from my memory, just from my phone. I opened the cabinet where we kept family photo albums. I didn't throw them away. I didn't burn them. I simply packed them into a box labeled archived. There was no anger in it, just release. I called the care facility where they once tried to ship Erawan without warning, informed them that Rowena and Magdalene were no longer authorized to inquire, visit, or make decisions. I updated the emergency contact form again. This time, it had only my name, and it would stay that way. As Maria sent over final confirmations for the court file, I signed them, digitally archived them. The house was now under my management. All properties, all medical rights, all legacy. I wasn't rebuilding this house anymore. I was building something new, somewhere else. Maybe not yet physically, but internally, the foundation was already poured. That evening, I steeped a cup of chamomile, the same kind Erawan used to make when I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window and let the silence stretch in all the ways it hadn't before, comforting, not oppressive. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps at the front door. I opened it and found a brown paper envelope taped to the mailbox. No return address, just one sticky note across the front. "We're not done." I brought it inside and placed it on the kitchen table, stared at it for a moment, then walked over to the freezer, opened the door, and slid the envelope into the back, behind a bag of frozen peas and a half-eaten pint of mint chip. Some things deserve to stay cold for a while. The USB drive sat on my desk for 3 days. I didn't open it right away. I didn't even touch it. I needed to be sure, absolutely certain, that I was opening it for the right reason. Not to stoke old pain, not to scratch an old itch, but because I was finally strong enough to handle whatever truth it held. When I finally plugged it in, I expected recordings, maybe documents, maybe some last-ditch manipulation from Rowena. Instead, I saw Erawan's face. She was seated in her old sunroom, hair brushed, glasses slightly crooked, eyes steady. The timestamp put the video at nearly a month before she collapsed. She spoke slowly but clearly, the words measured like stones placed deliberately in a garden path. "If you're seeing this," she said, "it means I chose you, and they didn't know I did. Because the best truths live quietly. They don't scream, they stay. She recounted moments of being cornered, pressured to sign, lied to about finances and care plans. But her voice never cracked. It stayed calm, resolute. "You didn't inherit wealth, Seraphine," she said. "You earned trust. That's rarer. That's what matters." The screen faded to black. I exhaled, long, deep, and quiet. Later that morning, as Maria called with the update I'd been half expecting, Rowena and Lavinia were now under formal criminal investigation. The financial trail had reached the state attorney general's office, and indictments were likely. Rowena's social media presence had begun to bleed followers. A few brands quietly pulled back sponsorships. A local news segment ran an exposé on elder abuse using Rowena's livestream footage and carefully edited Instagram clips as an example of modern-day emotional laundering. Meanwhile, Lavinia's prestigious golf club sent him a formal suspension letter pending review. He hadn't shown his face since. I was summoned to a private mediation hearing, but I didn't go. I sent Maria in my place, along with a signed letter declining further legal pursuit for civil damages. Not out of mercy, out of clarity. That same afternoon, I redirected a portion of Erowyn's estate funds, enough to launch a local foundation dedicated to supporting family caregivers and fighting elder exploitation. In my message to the board, I wrote, "This legacy isn't a trophy, it's a promise kept." As Maria called afterward, her voice almost playful. "You know," she said, "you're the only one I've seen make power look graceful." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said thank you and returned to my inbox. 1 week later, the Still Here Foundation officially launched. The local community center agreed to dedicate an entire wing to legal advocacy and elderly care support. On opening day, I didn't speak to the press, I didn't cut a ribbon, I didn't pose for photos, but I did speak. In a quiet room filled with folding chairs and mismatched teacups, I stood beside Erowyn's wheelchair and said, "Being present is louder than posting. Being real is stronger than being right." The room clapped softly. No fireworks, just warmth. Erowyn squeezed my hand. That night, back home, I retrieved the old will, the one Lavinia tried to build his future on. I placed it in the fireplace and struck a single match. As it curled into ash, I whispered one word: done. I replaced the hallway photo, the one where I'd been cropped out. This time, I put up a new picture, Erowyn beside me, both of us laughing over something unimportant, something real. Beneath it, I wrote, "Still standing." Then, for the first time in weeks, I walked into my room, turned out the lights, and sat with the quiet. Not the suffocating kind, the clear kind. They erased me from their version of the story, I thought, my hand resting on the windowsill. So I rewrote it. And this time, I kept the pen.